I kind of joke that that therapists fall into two categories. Either they are like have significant trauma histories. This is what I say. Either they're fucked up, sorry for my language, or they have a savior complex. And I always thought I fell into category number two. Like I have a savior complex, right? And I remember watching the movie Dirty Dancing, probably the original one, you know, like I think there's repeats since then, but and I remember sitting there, I was probably in middle school and watching that first opening scene where they taught where Baby has this dialogue around how she's going to save the world. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That was like, became my, like, that's what I'm going to do. And my dad was like a loving, compassionate, and caring person and always helped everybody. And my mom is the same. And neither one of them, somehow I became the social worker in the, you know, my dad's a plumber and my mom was a secretary. And I just knew that I needed to make an impact. People have always fascinated with me. Always. I take people watching to the extreme. And I think that's probably kind of what drew me to yoga, because it brought in like the physical aspects, like the anatomical body movements. And I can now like look at somebody on the street and be like, you know, pinpoint their trauma and their story. And that was like my goal. And part of the reason that was my goal was because it was the only way I felt valuable, right? If I could sit with you and figure out your story and help you get to where you want to be, then I had value. And I don't know if that comes from, well, did you know, it comes from, part of it is like being the youngest of four by a significant age gap. And just kind of feeling like I was always just kind of brought along, you know, bring her along for the journey. Just like there was nobody ever showed up for my stuff, because of course, by the time my stuff was going on, my siblings were all out of the house. They were like in college and away and living their lives and in their early 20s. And so my child brain was like, oh, that's because I'm not as important. Right. Now I understand as an adult, they were like away at college. I know what it's like to be at college. So you know, getting home to their little sister's like field hockey game or skating competition was not a priority. So that story started this, like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm not valuable enough. I'm not worthy enough. And somewhere along the line, I was working with a coach, 10 or so years ago at the start of my yoga journey. And it was a yoga teacher, and we were doing some work around like, you know, what do I want to be offering and all the different things that go along with teaching yoga. And I don't even know what I said to him, but I said something, I just spit something out of my mouth. And he goes, oh, okay, cool. So you chase knowledge so that you can offer people value, so that they find you valuable and want to connect with you and they want to have you in your life, and then you won't be abandoned. And I was like, I hate you. But like, there was some truth in that. And so starting to realize that, that this is like, there's all this inner world, right? Cause starting out in the yoga world, I don't know if anybody out there is in the yoga community, then, you know, you get on Instagram and like, you know, everybody's talking about, at least when I got into yoga 12 or 13 years ago, everyone was like talking about their trauma stories. And I was like, I don't have a trauma story. Like, I grew up in a like middle-class family. My parents are very loving. And, you know, like, I don't really have a trauma story. Like, I don't know what these people are talking about. A trauma story. Like, I'm great. I'm good. I don't have anything. I don't have any issues. I'm good. And I just realized that, right. Like, imagine that. I'm some kind of miracle. And I realized, working in the field of mental health, that's really common. That we don't look at our own story. We don't look at our own shit. Nobody. And I remember in grad school, now that I'm like thinking back, I remember in grad school them being like, if you're a therapist, you should have a therapist. And honestly, my opinion about therapy at that time was like, it was a crock of shit. Therapy doesn't work. And so I kind of set out as a therapist to be a therapist unlike any other that I had experienced. And that's what I hear. I hear like, and part of it's because I pull all these things together. Part of it's because of the way my brain works. It just kind of like goes in all sorts of directions. And then I see all sorts of things and say them out loud and people go, oh my God, how did you know that? I don't know. But that kind of brought me to this place of, crap. If I want to actually make an impact on the world, I have to do my own work. I have to like look at my own story and I have to dig through it. And I have to, look at the emotional resistance that shows up when I have to do something hard. And I need to like check my own mindset. One of the things that I've realized over the last like 6 or 7 years is that I was angry, that I was like an angry kid. It showed up for me. We were at my sister's wedding. My sister's getting married a second time. We were at her wedding and my mom said to me, "You're angry." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And I legitimately wasn't angry. And she was like, "No, you're angry. I can tell." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "I'm not angry." And she was like, no, you're angry. And it pushed my buttons and it made me angry. One. And then I started thinking,
exactly.
I wonder if that's been my story. I wonder if my story, the reason that I didn't think that I had any issues is because anger was my defense mechanism. That's absolutely the case. And the more work I've done on energy, I realized that I have a lot of, at the time, I was very left-brained. I had a lot of masculine energy, and anger was my go-to. And I can make anybody back down. Like, I'm like not a big person, like this little 5'2", tiny little thing, but I can make anybody back down. And I realized that's not who I wanted to be, because it wasn't in line with like the values that I had and the work that I want to be doing. How am I going to help people if I'm like, "Oh, you don't like what I'm saying"? We just scream at you. So that kind of brought me around to doing my own work. And then I just started slowly sharing. I actually had a therapy client come in 2015. She came into my office. And she sat down and I had just kind of dived in, like taking the dive in, like started peeling away the, like, I could be vulnerable. Yeah, practice this vulnerability thing, right? Because in the field of social work, in the field of mental health, and when you're in school and grad school, they tell you don't share anything about yourself. So they like train you not to be vulnerable. And I was like, well, how do you connect with people? This is my struggle. I'm telling people like, oh, in order to connect, you need to be vulnerable. Connect with people if you can't be vulnerable. And so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to give it a try. And I was like, okay, source, universe, thing that is higher than me, help me out here. I'm going to do this vulnerability thing and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out how to get from where I am right now to where I want to be by using the practice of vulnerability. Of course, I had like watched Brene Brown's, vulnerability, power of vulnerability. And I was like, I was in. And I had this client walk in and she sat down in the chair and she started telling me her story. And her story included like chronic suicidality. She had been, for her entire life since she was an adolescent, extensive trauma history. She had said, it's okay because if it gets bad enough, I can just kill myself. That was always her story. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so I started talking to her about how, who is she communicating with? How is she doing this stuff? And I just realized the things that I was saying to her were the things that I needed to hear myself about my own journey. And it was around vulnerability and how to practice it. And she was like, I don't know how to do that. I need you to teach me. And I was like, okay, let's figure this out because I don't know how to do it either. And so that kind of started that work, really started this coaching journey that I'm on. Really began with this woman walking into my office in 2015 and being like, I need to learn how to be vulnerable. And I don't really want to spend the rest of my life walking around going, it's fine. If it gets bad enough, I could just kill myself. And that was like a legitimate solution. You're like, oh, I have to, my gas tank's on empty. What do I do? Well, I could go to the gas station myself. I could, break down on the side of the road and have AAA bring me gas. That was like a legitimate, just solution. Yeah, it's bad enough. It'll be fine. And so through her journey in therapy, there was a lot of growth. Over the next 12 months, we both did a lot of growing. And then all the new clients that started showing up were clients that were needing to learn how to be vulnerable. It's like, thanks, universe. Um, thanks for beating me over the head with this. And then from there, I started having other therapists that were like, your therapy practice is so successful. How do I do that? Like, I don't want to be working in a group practice anymore. You have an individual practice by yourself. You don't advertise and you're full. And I was like, okay. And so I started doing,
I can teach you that.
Yeah, I can teach you that. And I did it like really, not real structured, just kind of like, sure, let's do some coaching and I'll like walk you through the process. And all the work was on like vulnerability, self-work, right? Doing the inner stuff, looking at the ugly stuff. And I have one coaching client that I'm still working with today that is still like on step 1 of that process. She's like, I know I've got big walls. I'm like, it's fine.